The rain was falling softly outside the small wooden house at the edge of the village. Inside, an old woman named Margaret sat quietly at a small table near the window. Her wrinkled hands held a faded photograph. In the photo, a young boy with bright eyes and a big smile stood beside her. That boy was her son, Daniel. Margaret looked at the picture every evening. It had become a habit over the years. Sometimes she smiled when she remembered the happy days, and sometimes tears slowly rolled down her cheeks. Daniel was the only child Margaret had. When he was born, Margaret promised herself that she would give him the best life possible, even if it meant sacrificing her own happiness. Margaret's life had never been easy. Her husband died when Daniel was only 3 years old. She suddenly found herself alone, responsible for raising a small child with very little money. To survive, Margaret worked everywhere she could. During the day, she cleaned houses for wealthy families in the town. At night, she sewed clothes for neighbors to earn a few extra coins. There were many nights when Margaret went to sleep hungry, but she never allowed Daniel to feel that poverty. She always made sure he had food on his plate, books for school, and warm clothes during winter. Daniel grew up as a smart and ambitious boy. His teachers often told Margaret that he had a bright future ahead of him. One evening, Daniel ran home excitedly with a letter in his hand. "Mom, Mom," he shouted while opening the door. Margaret looked up from the old sewing machine. "What happened, my son?" "I get accepted into a university in Europe," Daniel said, with shining eyes. Margaret froze for a moment. She knew this was a big opportunity for him, but it also meant he would leave her. But instead of showing sadness, she smiled. "That is wonderful, Daniel. I'm very proud of you." "But it's expensive," Daniel said quietly. Margaret didn't answer immediately. That night, she sat alone, thinking deeply. She looked around the small house, the old furniture, the small garden outside. The next morning, Margaret made a difficult decision. She sold the small piece of land that her husband had left behind. It was the only valuable thing she owned. With that money, she paid for Daniel's education and travel. When Daniel was about to leave, Margaret hugged him tightly at the bus station. "Mom, don't worry," Daniel said. "When I succeed, I will come back and take you with me. You will live with me and my family. You will never be alone again." Margaret smiled with tears in her eyes. "I believe you, my son." Daniel left for Europe, chasing his dreams. At first, Daniel called Margaret every week. He told her about his new life, his studies, his friends, and the beautiful cities he visited. Margaret waited for those calls like they were the most precious moments of her life. But as time passed, the calls became less frequent. Once a week became once a month, then once every few months. Margaret always told herself that Daniel was busy with his studies and work. Years passed. Daniel graduated from university and found a good job in a big city. He eventually got married and started a family. Margaret learned about these things through short phone calls and sometimes through photos sent by email from a neighbor who helped her read them. One day, Daniel called again. "Mom," he said, "I'm very busy these days. Life here is fast. But don't worry. One day I will come and bring you here." Margaret smiled again. "I will wait." She always waited. Every morning, she cleaned the house and prepared tea, as if Daniel might suddenly walk through the door. She kept his childhood room exactly the same. His old books were still on the shelf. His small wooden toy car was still on the table. Years continued to pass. Margaret grew older and weaker. Her hair turned completely white, and walking became difficult. But she still believed that one day Daniel would return. One cold winter evening, Margaret received a letter. Her hands trembled as she opened it. It was from Daniel. In the letter, he wrote, "Mom, life here is very complicated. My work keeps me busy, and my children are in school. Traveling is difficult. I'm sorry I couldn't visit you for so long. I hope you understand." Margaret read the letter slowly. Her heart felt heavy, but she did not feel anger, only loneliness. She placed the letter beside the photograph on the table. The days became quieter. Sometimes the neighbors visited her, bringing food or helping her with small tasks. But most of the time, Margaret was alone. One evening, a young woman from the village came to check on her. She found Margaret sitting quietly near the window, holding Daniel's photograph. The young woman asked softly, "Grandma Margaret, why do you keep waiting? Why don't you move somewhere else where people can take care of you?" Margaret smiled gently. "Because he is my son, and a mother never stops waiting." The young woman's eyes filled with tears. One spring morning, the village doctor came to check on Margaret. Her health had become very fragile. Before leaving, Margaret gave the doctor a small box. "Please give this to my son if he ever comes back," she said softly. A few weeks later, Margaret peacefully passed away in her small house. The village held a quiet funeral for her. Months later, Daniel finally decided to visit his hometown after many years. When he arrived at the old house, he found it empty. The neighbor told him the news. Daniel felt something break inside his heart. He rushed to the small graveyard where Margaret was buried. Standing there, he realized how much time he had lost. The doctor gave Daniel the small box Margaret had left. Inside the box was the old photograph of them together, in a letter. Daniel opened the letter with shaking hands. It read, "My dear son, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer there to welcome you. Please do not feel guilty. I understand that life becomes busy. I want you to know that I was always proud of you. Every day I prayed for your happiness. Even though you were far away, you were always in my heart. Remember one thing, my son. Success means nothing if we forget the people who loved us when we had nothing. Take care of your children, love them, and never forget the people who sacrifice everything for you. With love, your mother." Daniel fell to his knees beside the grave. For the first time in many years, he cried like a child. He realized that while he had been chasing success, he had lost something far more valuable. A mother's presence, a mother's love, something that could never be replaced. From that day forward, Daniel changed his life. He spent more time with his family and often told his children about their grandmother. He made sure they understood the importance of love, gratitude, and family. But deep inside his heart, one regret always remained. He could never go back and hug his mother one last time. Moral of the story: never forget the people who sacrificed their happiness for you. Success, money, and busy lives should never make us forget our parents, because one day we may realize that the time we ignored them was the time we can never get back.